The circle closed before Bruce Lee had finished his drink. 5 men, each one built like a door, each one paid to hurt people professionally. And in the center of that circle stood a man who weighed 135 pounds, holding a glass of water, completely still. What happened in the next 90 seconds would become one of the most retold stories in Hollywood history. Not because of the violence, but because of what Frank Sinatra did when he finally walked through that door. Hollywood, California. Spring 1964. The Sands had its crowd, the Rat Pack had its orbit, and Hollywood in the early 60s had its power structures. Invisible walls that told you exactly where you stood, who you were allowed to talk to, and what happened if you crossed the wrong man's territory. Frank Sinatra was not merely a singer by 1964. He was an institution, a force of nature in a tuxedo. His name opened doors that didn't exist for other people. His security team, hand-selected, former military and law enforcement, were not decorative. They were functional, and they had a reputation for handling problems quietly, efficiently, and completely. Bruce Lee was 23 years old. He had arrived in Los Angeles the way most young men with extraordinary gifts arrive in cities that don't yet know their name. Quietly, without fanfare, carrying everything that mattered in a single bag. He was teaching martial arts. He was auditioning. He was doing what talented people do before the world catches up to what they already know about themselves. He stood 5 feet 7 inches tall. He weighed, on a heavy day, 138 pounds. His arms, when relaxed, looked ordinary. His hands looked like a student's hands. There was nothing about him, at rest, that prepared you for what he was in motion. The party, the trigger, the circle. It was the kind of Hollywood gathering that happened constantly in that era. A producer's home in the hills, industry people mixed with talent mixed with money. Everyone performing a version of themselves that was slightly more confident than the truth. Music from somewhere inside. Drinks on every surface. The smell of cigarette smoke and expensive cologne layered over chlorine from the pool. Bruce had been invited through a mutual contact, a martial arts connection, who moved in crossover circles. He was not there to network aggressively. He was not there to impress anyone. He was there because someone had asked him to come, and he had come. He was standing near the edge of the main room, speaking quietly with 2 people he had just met, when the first shoulder hit him. It wasn't an accident. The man was 6 feet 2, 220 pounds of deliberate mass, one of Sinatra's inner security detail, a former Golden Gloves fighter named Carlucci, who had spent 8 years making problems disappear before they became problems. He walked through spaces like he owned them. He expected people to move. Bruce Lee did not move. Not out of arrogance. Not out of posturing. He simply registered the shoulder contact the way a tree registers wind. Acknowledged it. Absorbed it, remained. Carlucci stopped. He turned around slowly. The way large men turn when they want the turn itself to be a warning. "You're in the way," he said. Bruce looked at him with the expression that everyone who ever trained with him would later describe the same way. Calm. Present. Slightly curious. Not afraid. Not aggressive. Just watching. "I don't think so," Bruce said quietly. That was enough. That was all it took. Within 4 minutes, there were 5 of them. The circle. They arranged themselves the way trained security personnel arrange themselves, not in a line, which is theatrical and inefficient, but in a loose arc that could become a circle. Each man covering the angles. Each man within striking distance. Each man watching Bruce the way professionals watch threats, without visible emotion, calculating distance and timing. The room had not gone silent, but the immediate space had. The people nearby had drifted back, without being fully aware they were drifting. Something in the air pressure had changed. Carlucci stood directly in front. To Bruce's left, a man named Donovan, former military police, 6 feet even, neck like a structural column. To his right, 2 more, Patterson, a karate practitioner who held a brown belt under a respected Pasadena instructor, and Reeves, whose background was wrestling, who had been state champion in Ohio 6 years earlier. Behind Bruce, completing the geometry, was the 5th man, Garza, the quiet one, always the most dangerous because the quiet ones commit. 5 men, combined weight somewhere north of 1,000 pounds, combined experience covering boxing, wrestling, formal karate, and professional violence. Bruce Lee set his glass of water down on the nearest surface. He did it carefully. Not because he was nervous. He simply didn't want to spill it. What happened in 90 seconds? Carlucci moved first. He came in with a straight right hand. Not a wild swing, but a trained punch. The kind that had connected with other faces in other rooms and produced the intended results. It was fast. It was committed. It was exactly the technique it was supposed to be. Bruce was not there when it arrived. The movement was so small that 3 of the 5 men didn't fully register it had happened. He had shifted 2 inches offline, no more than that, and Carlucci's fist had passed through air where Bruce's jaw had been a fraction of a second earlier. In the same motion, Bruce's left hand had come up, not a strike, a redirect, a pack-saw deflection that used Carlucci's own forward momentum to turn him slightly, exposing his right side. Bruce did not hit him. He let him finish turning. He stepped back. He stood still again. The room was paying full attention now. Donovan came from the left. A grab, not a strike, reaching for Bruce's collar with both hands. The way a large man grabs when he is confident in his size advantage. His hands found nothing. Bruce had stepped inside the grab before it closed, close enough that Donovan's own arms became the problem, tangled against Bruce's centerline where the leverage belonged to the smaller man. Bruce's right hand came up in a bong saw position, redirecting Donovan's left arm upward and breaking the geometry of the grab entirely. Then Bruce did something that would be discussed for years afterward. He put his hand flat on Donovan's chest, gently, deliberately, and pushed. Not hard, just enough. Donovan took 3 involuntary steps backward, not because the push was powerful, because the angle was perfect, the timing was exact, and for one moment his own body did not belong to him. He looked down at his chest. He looked up at Bruce. Patterson came in from the right with a front kick, a competent technique, driven off the back leg with reasonable hip rotation. His instructor would have recognized it immediately. It was legitimate. Bruce's response took 0.4 of a second. He intercepted it. Not blocked, intercepted, which is a different thing. His right hand met Patterson's shin before the kick reached full extension, at the moment when the leg was neither fully committed nor recoverable. A stop hit, one of the foundational concepts of Jeet Kune Do, applied at the precise moment the theory required. Patterson felt the contact and immediately understood that he had miscalculated something. Though he could not have said exactly what, he lowered his leg. Reeves, the wrestler, tried to close the distance, the correct instinct against a striker. Get inside the range where punches lose power. Get a grip. Take the fight to the ground where size returns its advantage. He didn't reach Bruce. What happened was so fast that the 4 witnesses who would recount it most clearly could never fully agree on the mechanics. What they agreed on was the result. Reeves was off balance. Then he was more off balance. Then he was holding the wall. He had not been thrown. He had not been struck. He had been redirected, twice in sequence, using the energy of his own forward movement, so efficiently that his body had simply gone where physics sent it. He stood with his hand on the wall, breathing. Garza, the quiet one, had not moved. He was looking at Bruce. Really looking. The way professionals look when they are updating their assessment in real time. Something had shifted in his calculation. He had entered the circle as the last piece of a simple equation. He was no longer certain the equation was simple. Bruce stood in the center of the 5 men. He had not been touched. He had thrown no punch. He had delivered no strike that would leave a mark. He was not breathing hard. He stood with his hands relaxed at his sides, and he waited with the patience of someone who had already decided how this would end and was simply allowing the other people in the room to reach the same conclusion on their own timeline. The door opens. Frank Sinatra had been in the back of the house. He walked through the doorway to the main room, still holding his own drink, mid-conversation with someone behind him, and stopped. He read the room in 2 seconds. He had enough experience with rooms like this, enough situations managed, enough men employed, to understand immediately what he was seeing. 5 of his people arranged around one man. That one man completely unhurt and completely still. His 5 people looking at each other with expressions he had never seen on their faces before. Sinatra walked forward. He had a particular kind of authority that came not from volume, but from the specific gravity of someone who has occupied the center of attention for so long that rooms reorganized themselves around his arrival. The circle opened. He stepped through it. He looked at Bruce Lee. Bruce looked back. Neither man spoke for a moment. Then Sinatra said, "Are you all right?" Not to his men, to Bruce. Bruce nodded once. Yes. Sinatra turned and looked at Carlucci. Carlucci said nothing. There was nothing to say. The geometry of the room had already said everything. Sinatra turned back to Bruce. He extended his hand. "Frank Sinatra," he said. "Bruce Lee." Bruce said and shook it. What Frank said afterward. Sinatra did not raise his voice that evening. He did not make a speech. He did not perform the moment for the crowd that was now watching with full attention. He asked Bruce to sit with him. They talked for 40 minutes. About discipline, about craft, about the difference between what people perform and what they actually are. Sinatra had spent 30 years in a business that rewarded performance. He understood, perhaps better than most, what it looked like when something was real. Later, months later, in a conversation that would be repeated through entertainment circles for years, Sinatra was asked about that evening, about what he had thought when he walked into the room and saw 5 of his best men standing around a 135-pound Chinese martial artist who appeared to have handled them without a visible effort. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I've been around fighters my whole life. I know what a tough guy looks like." He didn't look like a tough guy. A pause. He looked like something else entirely. He looked like a man who had already finished the fight before anyone else knew it had started. Epilogue. 43 people were present in that room on that evening. Of those 43, fewer than 15 had a clear line of sight to what occurred in those 90 seconds. Accounts would vary. Specific techniques would be disputed. Whether Donovan actually touched the wall, or whether it was Reeves, people would disagree for decades. What no one disputed was this. 5 trained men, professionals, had moved toward Bruce Lee, and then they had stopped moving toward Bruce Lee. And the one man standing unhurt and undisturbed in the center of that geometry was the one man who had arrived weighing 138 pounds. Bruce Lee would go on to redefine what the world understood about martial arts, about film, about the philosophy of physical combat. He would become something larger than any single story. But on that evening in the Hollywood Hills, he was simply a young man from Hong Kong with fast hands and a very clear mind, who had set down his glass of water carefully so it wouldn't spill. And Frank Sinatra, who had seen everything, who could not be easily impressed, who had survived his own decades of rooms that required navigation, had walked through a doorway, read what was in front of him, and extended his hand to the right man. Some people know, when they see it, what the real thing looks like. Frank Sinatra knew.